let's talk about word choice. And word choice is really important when it comes to writing. Another fancy word for word choice is diction. You hear that a little bit more when you're talking about literature and different authors' word choice. But essentially, diction is making sure you're really clearly thinking about the words you're choosing to use. So things that you need to watch out for when you're focusing on your word choice is watch out for those confusing words. Make sure you're using proper idioms, or just kind of the ways that we use our language, and then making sure that you're choosing the right verb. My trick for making sure I'm really closely checking my word choice is to read my writing out loud. I know it sounds silly, but there's things come across differently when you hear it out loud. So let's take a look at some common things that we want to consider. So with those confusing words, I've thrown a few sets up here that you may want to make sure that you're using properly. The first is affect and effect. So one thing to know about this, affect is a verb. So you can affect something. Effect is a noun, like cause and effect or side effects. All right. This is a good one that I see confused all the time, past and past. They sound the same, they're homophones, but past with an ed on the end is a past tense of a verb. Past is an adjective or an adverb depending on how it's used. It describes your location in relation to something, or it talks about the actual past in terms of past, present, future. All right? Fewer and less than is another set that's often confused. Now, fewer you use when you can count the items that you're talking about. So if I was talking about cups of coffee, I need fewer cups of coffee tomorrow. However, I would use the phrase less than if I'm talking about something that I can't count. So I can really numerate cups of coffee, but it's harder to count coffee in general. So I would say I need less coffee tomorrow than I had today. All right, and finally we've got allusion and illusion. Now, allusion is something that you see mostly in literature, sometimes in art, but it's when an author or creator makes a reference to another piece of literature or a work of art. I tend to try to remember that with the A equals art, whereas an illusion, something you might see in the desert, kind of like a mirage, right? Something that doesn't really exist. So those are some commonly confused words that you want to make sure you keep your eye out for when you're selecting them. Another thing you want to be aware of, like I said, is idioms. All right, and really where I see the most errors is the idiomatic use of prepositions. So if you notice, there's just things in our language that go together just because. There's not really any rhyme or reason to it. You just have to memorize it, and the more you read, the more you'll kind of pick up on those things. But some commonly confused ones. We say intend to do something, so to goes with intend. Relate to somebody, not relate with them. All right, we work with somebody. You're jealous of something, oblivious to, and this one's a really tough one. You're different from. People often want to say different than because it's a comparison, but you're different from. That's our idiomatic use in English, and then separate from as well. So some of that is just taking a look and being exposed to the language, but make sure you're using those idiomatic prepositions correctly. And then finally, you want to make sure you're using the correct verb. So I threw some commonly confused verbs up here. Lay and lie, set and sit, raise and rise. The simple rule here is that everything on this left-hand side should be followed by a noun. Over here, you follow it with other ideas. All right? One way I remember this is think a chicken lays eggs. You wouldn't say a chicken lies eggs. So that helps me remember that that's the part of the pair that goes with a noun. You're asked to set the table, not sit the table. So I remember that set goes with that. And my dad will be proud of this one because he used to always do it at my basketball games. You raise the roof, which reminds me that I've got to pair nouns with raise. You don't rise the roof. So hopefully those things will help you remember some of these commonly confused words and help you think a little bit more closely about your diction.